As followers of Christ, we are faced with new norms and societal changes that may differ from our worldview. We see fads continue to shape not only our culture, but our beliefs as well. Are we following the trends of life, or are we seeking after the deeper truths which God places before us? We'll discuss these questions and more in Trend or Truth.
Hey and hello, this is Zorn from the Amp Station, coming at you with a series we've been really excited about to kind of talk over. We've been doing this in our Thursday night small group, which you can find on Zoom right now. We're going to kind of hold off on the whole face-to-face deal until June 1st and reevaluate. Today I have with me, he's our apologetics guru. Guru's not a bad word, right? And it is from the Church of the Nazarene, and that's Wes Hostler.
Hey, sorry, I had a little something in my throat I had to get rid of, and I coughed on this mic. I'm going to have to sanitize it.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll have to 409 it. So, and then also with me is our good friend and producer extraordinaire, Mason Phillips.
How's it going?
And new graduate.
Yeah, that's right.
Today. The day that we're doing this, yeah.
Ceremony was today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we're going to talk about messy grace. And I don't know that you can do it in a sentence, but maybe in a sentence or two, kind of explain what messy grace is about.
Well, the series is about being messy as human beings, and God's grace is what gets us through that. Now, Caleb Kaltenbeck very specifically wrote a book about his experience with parents that are involved with the LGBTQ community. And so it's a great story just seeing his life and how he has come to faith in spite of some very negative impressions that the Christian community has really impacted his family with. At any rate, he's a pastor now. Discovery Church. He wrote the book, and then City on a Hill invited him to do a series with videos and a lot of interviews with people that have been through similar things. It's just great stuff.
Yeah, for me, it definitely tackles how to love people that are involved in the LGBTQ community, but it also goes beyond that. It kind of shows you how to deal with people who aren't Christians, how to just love people and just to be real with people.
That's really good. I know you're tired of me saying this, but for me, this thing is about really taking what I think, and again, this is Zornio opinion, we just talked about this, but what I think is one of the toughest things for Christians to get their mind, and especially their heart around homosexuality, gay, LGBTQ, and I've said all along in this, I don't believe that they're even teaching us about that. They are, but I think they're teaching us that if we can find some compassion, if we can find a way to love those people without condoning or condemning, then if we can do that, that opens us up for a whole lot of things that we struggle with and really in our minds don't seem as offensive or rude or, you know what I'm saying? It's just one of those things that LGBTQ in the world, honestly, until recently has always been kind of seen as a worse thing to be doing. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, that's not how God sees it, you know? And I think that's one of the things that as Christians, we have to realize that God doesn't look at it like that way. Jesus really set the example because he was dealing with people on a regular basis that were afflicted. And as a matter of fact, you had one of our topics was people don't go to the doctor when they are healthy. They go to the doctor when they're sick, and that's kind of the thing that we're talking about here, kind of along that lines.
Absolutely. And the most important thing we need to remember is that we're all in need of a doctor. And we're all messy in one way or another. And what Jesus was really saying is it's people that will acknowledge that they need God are the ones that are going to be more receptive to the ministry of Jesus. There's a lot of people that are in denial about needing God. And that's what Jesus was talking about, you know, when you have the religious elite essentially saying that they had earned their spot, their favor in God's eyes. You know, you could go back through the Beatitudes and talk about all these people that knew they needed God because of their situation.
I agree with what you're saying, but I'm looking more towards, and Mason, I kind of want your thoughts on this. I'm looking more towards how Christians don't realize that the people that we're supposed to be trying to bring are those sick people. And I don't mean sick like LGBTQ. I mean like in the reference to the doctor. But he was going to get people that had problems, not people that are already in the church. He wasn't going after the 120, he was going and finding people. Of course, he couldn't get the 120 because that comes later. But I'm just saying those kinds of people, he was finding people and that needed healing, that needed something in their life, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He was always either sitting or dining with people who maybe didn't believe that he was the Son of God, but he had a way of drawing people to him because he just loved anybody that he came into contact with. He would, of course, correct people where they needed it, but he didn't judge you for being different or being not right with God. He was open with everybody, and he was welcoming to anybody. He was not putting people in the fringe or saying you can't belong. He wanted everybody to come into the kingdom.
This particular sin or this particular affliction is not what I'm after. That's not the case. And then people that were God followers, maybe not Jesus followers, were ridiculing him because they didn't associate with those kinds of people. You were supposed to stone them and kind of make it a point that they don't belong.
Well, and that was the stigma attached to handicaps or things in their lives that everyone could see. They automatically assumed that was a curse from God because of their sin. And they didn't even have to know what the sin was. They just if this wouldn't have happened to you if you weren't cursed by God. And so Jesus straightens that out too. Along those same lines, the point Jesus was making is you can see what's going on, whether it's, the woman caught in adultery or the Samaritan woman, the tax collector, or just go down the list of these people. Their sin was kind of on their sleeve, so to speak.
Right.
And so he's essentially saying, well, that doesn't mean because of their behavior is external and obvious that your heart is any more pure than theirs is.
Right.
And that's the big deal. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that there's not sin in someone's life.
Well, and that's like we were talking about, Jesus with the woman that was adulterous, and all the guys are asking to stone her, and Jesus bends down in the sand, and I've heard it one way of putting it that he may have been writing those guys' sins down and reminded them that, hey, you can't even cast the first stone because this is yours,
Right.
And I just think that's an interesting way to look at it, and a pretty good reason to maybe drop the stone and turn and walk away. So would it help? Do you guys think it would help if maybe we just kind of did a quick little character rundown?
Yeah.
Not character is probably not the right word,
but the people involved with the Messy Grace
yeah.
series. Yeah.
So I think the simplest one is probably Sam, who's a pastor now. He was from England. I think he's in Chicago or something now. I'm not positive.
Yeah, I'm not sure where Sam actually lives. I think he's still in the UK because I've seen him in other ministries. So I think Sam Albury is still there in the UK doing different things.
Which he has trouble with same-sex attraction, knows that doesn't align with the life of Christ, so he has chosen to live a celibate life and is actually a pastor. He's one of these guys, which let's just touch on this real quick while we're here. He's one of the guys that doesn't have, he'll tell you, he's like, my childhood was awesome, because there's a lot of people that believe that these kinds of things happen because you were beaten or you were molested or you had some trauma that pushed you towards this. And he's just right up front and telling you that I just found one day that I had same-sex attraction. For me, it's easier to give someone some leniency if I know they got a backstory. We talk about a Subway story in here, and it's easy to go, oh, well, they were beaten. Okay, so I can give them some compassion in an uncomfortable situation. But someone that really doesn't have a built-in excuse, does that change our view on things?
He says something very interesting. I was listening to the first episode today, that being born with that inclination of same-sex attraction is not your choice, but it's how you act on it. That's your choice.
Nice.
That's how you can go about it. It just shows you that it's not necessarily your background that affects you to be more prone to being homosexual or to drinking or name the sin. There you go. But
right.
It's not the background so much that makes you inclined to do certain things. Really, it's how you act on it, not what you're more inclined to do.
Yeah, and he actually didn't find Christ until later in life, right? Like maybe when he was a teenager or late teens or something.
Definitely a teenager, and I don't know the exact age, but he was talking about some people that he had met because he needed a part-time job, and this family that ran this whatever kind of retail outlet or whatever it was, I can't remember, said that they were the model Christians. They lived what we consider to be followers of Christ. He just goes into describing the way that they modeled and reflected Christ in a way that we don't always hear about. And so that truth and grace balance, they absolutely were the example. And so whenever he began to want what they had, he didn't have some distorted version of it. Like sometimes we hear of people as like, well, I'm modeling myself after this particular person that I know is a believer. And then they get to reading the Bible and all of a sudden there's contradictions. And he never found that in those people. And so it's a great story because he talks about how his behavior was good because Christianity originally had been presented to him as a younger person before his parents or he believed as a just be a good boy type of thing and you'll end up going to heaven. That's what he was shown, or I think he said that's the kind of Christianity I was brushed with. And then comes to find out that it's a lot deeper than that, especially when you understand who Jesus is. And so him talking about his behavior being okay because of the way he was raised with certain rules that lined up with what we might consider to be Christian principles, he figured out his problem was internal. He behaved well,
right,
but he said we're all attracted to things we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And that really painted
that
great
hit everybody
picture.
in the group, right? Kind of right in the face because again, now you're not talking about abomination sin. You're talking about sin that's yours, you know, and you're like, "Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I am attracted to things that I shouldn't be attracted to."
Yeah, everybody deals with some kind of sexual sin, whether it be like so many guys, including myself, have an addiction to pornography that we're trying to beat and trying to get past, and whether it's attracted to the opposite sex or the same sex, everybody has some kind of sexual brokenness that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, and I believe that goes beyond just the sexual nature of it, because part of my thing before I gave my life back to Christ was, I played golf every day. I loved golf. I wanted to be out there all the time. And that's not even an unhealthy thing, really, until it becomes an unhealthy thing, until it's keeping you from God, And so just something to really think about there. And wasn't it when Caleb was talking about the Bible not being about good and being rewarded, but it's also about being bad and experiencing God's grace? Was it Sam?
It was Sam that said that same thing.
Was it Sam? Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure on that. So the next one that would probably be a good one to talk about is Jackie Hill Perry.
Yes.
Who is like a famous wordsmith now, kind of a little bit of a rap type deal to it, but she grew up without a father figure, but what she had seen of a father figure, she emulated because she saw that men could do things that women couldn't at a very early age. So she started emulating that, even from the way that she stood to pee to model that. She'd said that she had saw some men drinking beer, so she would take a bottle of root beer and drink it the same way, and just started modeling that behavior at a very young age. And over time, it kind of morphed into a male appearance to some degree. She said she'd went to a club and dressed like a guy one day, and it was a gay club, a women's club, and got hit on and kind of liked it. Can you expand on that a little bit more, Wes, and what all she was into?
She talked about the reason that she wanted to emulate men is she felt like being a woman was weak. The men that she had had interactions with through her mom were all very strong role models, so to speak. And it was almost like she said, guys can get away with anything. And so if I become a woman or if I'm feminine and fulfill that role model, then I'm opening myself up to pain. Whereas a guy can do anything he wants.
Yeah, and she just was convinced of it too, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think she said something like her mom said that at her age, every guy she'd been with had cheated on her, so she didn't feel like she could trust that kind of relationship. Yeah, because she even said and you knew him a long time. Yeah. So it's like, if that guy's going to do you wrong, then or because she was so much older, you're so much older than me, and you had something like that. So, and she ends up having a really cool transformation because of a person that entered her life. She didn't ignore the fact that she was lesbian, but she was willing to, how'd she put it? She said, let's just put that aside for now and try to teach you how to love Jesus, because you don't even know how to love Jesus. But I'm not going to address the fact that you're lesbian. I'm just going to, let's see if we can teach you how to love Jesus and see what happens from there, right?
Absolutely. I think with anything in life, if we just try to stop doing something, it's going to be harder than if we try to replace it with something good. And I believe that's what we see, is that Jesus wants us to pursue righteousness, to pursue a relationship with him. And you can't do both. It's just an impossibility. So this woman was obviously very wise and just wanted Jackie to pursue her relationship with Christ, and said, these are the things that will help you draw closer in relationship with him. It will replace all these other things that you think give you identity or define you. I think she just said, you need to learn how to love Jesus.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there was something I heard a pastor talking about this in a service a couple of years ago. He was taking a flight, and he was positioned next to a lady who was very adamant that she wanted nothing to do with God. And he didn't want to talk to anybody on that flight. His intention was to go in there, put his head down, go to sleep. And he got put right next to somebody who was going to make him be attentive and make him be alert throughout the entire flight. So he was talking to her, and she was holding a beer in her hand, and they got to talking about what they did, what she did. And he said that, he was a pastor, and she's like, well, I bet you want to talk about this beer I have in my hand. He's like, well, no, I don't think God really cares about that right now. I think right now he just wants a relationship with you, and he'll handle that later.
So good. That's kind of how we like to address things here, is let us love on you, and God will slowly start telling you the things that he wants you to shed, And
yeah.
One of the things that come to mind was, I don't know why they don't have this lady that loved Jackie so much and taught her how to love Jesus. She'd be an awesome person to have in the series. But one of the things that, and you kind of touched on it at the start, Mason, was that lady really had a way with just loving people where they're at, didn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
That would be an amazing model to have around and be, an influence in your life. And if we can learn something from that, because it was a big deal to her. Wasn't one of her points was not to talk about the bad things that are in your life, but talk about the good things that Jesus has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other guests is Michael, who is kind of along the same lines with Sam. He is wanting to be a pastor, has struggled with same-sex attraction, got busted by his mom on his history, but he was trying to follow Christ and was failing at it. I mean, admittedly, and was just really struggling. And his mom crushed him with a statement that said, you're just not the Christ follower that I thought you were going to be,
Yeah, I think she said something like, I wish you had dealt with a drug addiction because at least that could be fixed.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. A drug addiction can be fixed, but Jesus can't overcome
right
LGBTQ. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And not to mention, so is that easier to love? Because I've been around drug addicts. I've been around alcohol. I was an alcohol. I promise you, I wasn't easy to love.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just how a lot of people think that for some reason those two sins are completely separated and that there's no way of coming back from a homosexual background.
Right. That's so good. So Michael kind of follows the same steps as Sam. He decides he's going to follow Christ, and that doesn't align, so he kind of goes into a celibate lifestyle. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, what about that? I mean, Christians leading celibate lifestyles that are tempted by same-sex attraction. I mean, it's tough enough to deal with temptation, you know what I'm saying? But what about someone that's struggling with that?
Sam does a great job. I mean, he just has a way with words that puts things very simply, but it's profound. And he talks about, it's crazy in our culture to think that we could live without sex.
Yeah. I was hoping this is where you were going with this.
Yeah. And I don't even know how to bridge this gap simply for the fact of how right he is. It's almost understood that sex is the thing that is in movies, it's in music, it's in all kinds of social media, on and on and on. And we don't realize how much of our lives revolves around sexual interaction.
Right.
Actually, it's not even just relationships. I mean, there's a lot of times that sex is the core of just an interaction, even if you don't know that person very well. And so he's trying to help explain that there is a difference between intimacy and sex, and we interchange those words way too often. Intimacy is about having the closest relationship possible according to what God wants us to have. And so if we talk about intimacy with God, then of course it's not sexual. And people, from the outside looking in may find that really strange to use those definitions. And so he talks about that I can't live my life without intimacy.
Right.
He said, but the relationships that I have that are tighter than any blood relationships that we have with family or whatever, absolutely are everything that I need to be fulfilled. And it's only because people are told from a very young age that sex is the most fulfilling relationship that we think that way.
Right.
Yep.
Right. I remember one time on an earlier podcast, Mason, you had said that if you want a distant God, you'll have a distant God.
Right.
And so how does this intimacy and your relationship with God work? Is that something that you treasure and try to accomplish?
Absolutely. I try and work on it as much as I can every day. There are days that I fail and that relationship doesn't really grow anywhere, but then there are days that are so strong that I feel like he's the closest person that I've ever been to. And it's all reliant on how much do you want to pursue this relationship? How much do you want to dig into it and build it and make it stronger? You can do that with a person and not have the sex be a part of it.
Right.
Like Sam says, like we can live without sex, but we cannot live without intimacy. We have to be close with somebody so that they can know us and so that we can know them, so that we can help them with their problems. They can help us with ours, so we can talk these things out.
So
and
good.
It's the same way with God. We got to treat that relationship the exact same way.
And do you find that as you grow in that intimacy with God, that the temptations seem to fall away, or at least be easier to deal with?
It's definitely easier to tackle and easier to put away if that temptation comes my way. It's a lot easier to go to God and go into a moment of prayer and then have that feeling go away, because a lot of temptations do come from a feeling, but you have to tackle that feeling with Scripture and with prayer.
Wow, yeah, that's right. That's good. There's always times in my life where I have something that I really struggle with, and I try to pray it away. I try to read it away, and I mean, those things help for sure. But it's like there's just some time that all of a sudden I wake up 4 months later and I'm like, I haven't even thought about that, and it's such a victorious feeling, and you're just like, wow, thank you, Jesus, you know. So the next one is probably the what I think now. You can punch me in the face later, but you'll have to see me in person to do it. So I got till at least like June 1st. But Carly and Margaret. Carly is a post-operative transgender, right? She was a man, and now she's a female by an operation. And man, she just blows me away sometimes. There's times where she literally just like knifes me right in the heart with her words about how she's felt from people that claim to be Christians. And thankfully, her sister isn't one of those, because her sister, to me, is living another one of those really great examples of how we should love. And, we had the conversation about whether or not calling her Carly is a condoning. Is that condoning? And what did you guys think about that whenever we asked that the first time? Is Margaret condoning her actions by saying that, by calling her Carly as she wishes to be called?
Well, the very first session we talked about on a Thursday night, we said it's complicated.
Right, right. I remember that.
And it's when we try to oversimplify.
But just like once, right? It wasn't like 19 times we said it's complicated.
Well, and I mean, think of how many times people use that as a way to describe relationships. And it's because people are complicated. And we're made uniquely. We're individuals. And when you make generalizations about people, including people that are transgender or whatever, you're essentially saying, I'm writing you off. I'm not going to take the time to get to know who you are because you're all the same.
Yeah.
And you could say that about ethnicity, you could say that about color, you could say that about so many things, and it's why we get ourselves in trouble as the church today, because we like to make generalizations so we don't have to get to know people before we judge them. And so in this particular case, it's complicated, and trying to oversimplify whether or not using a name someone has chosen for themselves is either enabling them to live that lifestyle, or if it's just respecting their wishes. It's hard to say, and I think Margaret knows her sibling better than anyone else.
Right, yeah, for sure.
And with her doing that, it's a way for her to not try to control the relationship. It's like I could say, well, your name is Jeff Lozornio. I am not going to call you Zorn, even though that is the nickname you've chosen for yourself.
Oh, were you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, my bad.
Yes, that was you. So, but you see what I'm saying is that we choose nicknames for ourselves, and we get hung up on some things, which really is not a hill to die on.
Right.
And she does not in any way, shape, or form enable her to find her identity in that. In fact, that conversation came up several times that, Carly, you're so much more than just your body parts, than just your attraction to whichever sex it is, and all these things. And as you go throughout the different episodes, you see how complicated it is. But what you have to really pay attention to is the amount of pain that Carly's gone through, because she feels less than. Her value, her self-esteem have just been stomped on, and it doesn't do any good to make a person feel like God doesn't love them because of anything like the same-sex attraction, or because they have a problem with the sex they were born in. And we could go into gender dysphoria and things like that, but again, it's complicated.
But she also has such a high view of God when they wait till the 4th episode to reveal this to you. But you remember the words she was saying about her view of God while going through all this. Well, that had to come from Margaret. Right. And if calling her Carly kept the relationship intact, but she got to stay in relationship, so she still got to keep the conversation going, and that's one of the things that I think is just ginormous, is that we've got to be able to keep the conversation going. What do you think about the whole Carly name situation?
We all go by certain nicknames or certain names. I mean, in the end, it's just a name. The name doesn't even really define who you are. Well, we talked about this in last week's episode, Finding Identity. And it's, where are you finding your identity? Are you finding it in God? Are you finding it in your body? Are you finding it in your name? It's so important to decide where that's going to come from, because it really shapes who you are as a person.
Right. One of the things that I kind of come up with was, because they make it obvious that the parents were not ideal parents, especially the father.
The father threw a plate at Carly's face.
Yeah, I mean it was definitely abusive. I think they sugarcoated it, honestly. But they left it where you could paint your own portrait. And I think that it's one connection that Margaret has to show that she truly loves Carly. And sometimes that's what it takes, is what is the one thing that can show that you, because she knows that she doesn't feel loved. That's the biggest thing, is she doesn't feel loved. So if I can call her Carly, and we even we asked the question again last week, I think it was, about if we're Christian and it's going to irritate you that I call you anything other than Mason, why would I do that?
Right.
And
it's just going to drive the person away. It's not going to mend the relationship at all. It's not going to drive them to God or anything.
So she wants to be called Carly. I think sometimes that's our own want to be right before we want to be righteous pride. Well, I'm not doing it. What if God just asked you to? Would you do it then? Oh, well, yeah, if he asked me to. But he would never. Yeah, look at the people Jesus was hanging out with, and you tell me that he would never ask you to try to establish a relationship with that person? That's all we're asking you to do.
It was the Pharisees that were always talking about how Jesus was doing everything wrong, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the last person to talk about is Caleb. This guy's pretty spectacular to end up where he ended up. I mean, he talks about growing up with parents that were married. They divorce, I believe, at an early age. Both of them go into same-sex relationships. The dad's kind of like whoring around and just mixing it up with whoever. And the mom, though, gets into a monogamous relationship, and I think actually ends up maybe having a life partner. I don't know if it's a legal marriage, but they're definitely together for the long haul. And he goes to a rally with them, and at the end, there are people that are screaming at him, throwing water and urine on him, and he can't understand why they're doing this. And the mom looks at him, and this is another one of those just heartbreaking parts in the video, and says, Christians hate us, meaning that Christians hate LGBTQ. How'd that hit you guys?
That shows you how the world's view of Christians is shaped so much by people like that, the ones that are so abrasive towards people and that are so hateful towards people, like Westboro Baptist or anything like that.
Right.
Like, they think that that's how a Christian is, so that must be how God is. And it paints a negative view of how Christians treat those people, when really that's not how we are asked to do that. That's not how God views anybody. And it's heartbreaking that that's the way it's gone.
Right. What about you, Wes?
Well, and I think Sam did a great job, again, talking about, some people try to label that as Christian extremism. And he said it may be extreme, but there's nothing about it that's Christian.
Wow,
He said, if you were extreme about being a Christian, then it would look more like Christ.
Right.
And it looks nothing like Christ.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Like, I remember there's one part where Carly, she's lost for words, and she says, they're like, how do you want him to treat? And she's just like, just be Christian. And it just like was, oh my gosh, it was like the knockout punch.
Yeah.
So we really don't have much more time to go on this. But I think this is a perfect place to kind of cut it off. We've covered the characters.
Yeah.
Now we can gather some
we'll go
some
deeper
material
into it
that
next
we want
time.
to go over next week, and go over that stuff. I do want to put in here, just to kind of close it up, that because I think this is such a great way of putting this. Caleb Kaltenbeck, the guy that made this Messy Grace series, he used an illustration of church allowing people to belong before they believe. And we would never be smart enough to come up with that great phrasing here at the AMP station, but I do believe that's what the AMP station is all about.
Right.
It's about making people comfortable comfortable. It's about making them feel welcome. And then at some point, building a relationship so that we can start having tough conversations, so that we can start pouring the gospel into them. And I just believe it's super tough to do that without that relationship.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot. And I think this is showing you that most of these people had someone in their life that they were able to have a conversation with, be poured into, just feel loved, so that they could then learn how to love Jesus. I think that's one of the greatest things about what we got going here at the AMP station, what our young adults and OGs exemplify. And it just makes me proud to be a part of it. So enough plugging the AMP station. I do want to just let you know that the Messy Grace series by Caleb Kaltenbeck, they've released it on YouTube. There's 4 different videos. There's a Messy Grace 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's absolutely an amazing series. I suggest that you go and check it out for yourself. And if you do check it out, reach out on those social media pages and send us some questions. Send us your thoughts. Send us what you think. Maybe you get so interested in it that you're like, hey, I want to be on the podcast because we got an empty seat today. I'd love to fill that seat with someone that's watched the video, that's gotten something out of it, and feels like that they could come in here and talk about it and maybe speak life into some people that we don't even know that are listening or whatever. So I would love to have that opportunity to get some new blood in here, get some new direction of sight, things like that. So we would absolutely love that. We love you guys. We thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to getting back after this next week.
This podcast is recorded out of the AMP station in Claremore, Oklahoma. AMP is a Christian ministry geared towards college students and young adults, with an emphasis on loving God, loving people, and making disciples. Consider becoming a subscriber so you don't miss a single episode. You can follow us on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time.